away. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of The Recovery Scene. I'm your host, Leslie. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Today we have John Veris on our show. I'm very excited. His wife, Angela, actually put me in touch with him. John actually, I love this story. I'm going to love this story because, there's the whole choice, disease, debate, but then there's something in the middle where it wasn't your choice. What happened to John is he got in a work accident in 2009, I believe he said.
Yes.
And he was burned in various degrees, over 73% of his body. I'm going to let him get into that part of everything, but there are many avenues to addiction, just like there are many avenues to recovery. It's not a one size fits all. So also, if you have any questions for John, you can leave a comment below, leave a comment if you liked the story, or if there's other topics you'd like to hear from us. But for now, John, I am going to let you take it away. Thank you so much for being on The Recovery Scene.
Oh.
I'm so happy your wife got a hold of me.
Thank you for having me. I mean, we've been, both Angela and I have been such, huge fans, on TikTok, and I'm so happy that, I believe everything's moving to YouTube, correct?
I still do TikTok, but yes, my main thing is the Recovery Scene on YouTube. Yes. And that's where this will show up.
Yes, and I'm so excited about that. That is amazing. But I guess I'll start off with by saying that I love how you said that, the way you worded it. You said that there are so many different avenues and different ways to fall into addiction. Well, I'm not sure if it's falling in, but regardless, so not only because I was 18, but also because of the severity of which the burns, happened. It wasn't a question of, can he refuse this or can we, go another way? Like they had to give me, these just wild, basically pharmaceutical heroin for a very long time.
Right. Now, can I ask what happened? What was the accident?
Sure. Just a very brief, summary of it was that we were working on what we call, or used to call USTs. They were underground service tanks at fueling stations. So it's basically the big, tens of thousands of gallons of fuel that goes from, they're in tanks underneath the concrete. And that goes from there to the pump, and then that pump to your car. So we had those tanks cleaned out, and we were down inside of them, and there were 3 tanks that day. We had 2 of them finished, and basically what we were doing is something that Obama had forced the EPA to kind of push was to up the standards of these old, worn out, steel tanks and reinforce them and fix them with like really, long lasting and much stronger fiberglass and insulation and other things like that. Not your typical insulation, but insulate it in other ways. So we were just, on a job one day. It was actually our last day that we were supposed to be there. And we were supposed to work for about 4 hours and wrap up the day. And then we were going to be heading from Miami to Illinois to see my family, my mother's side of the family, for Thanksgiving. And about an hour or 2 into the workday, there was about 4.5 gallons of pure acetone. Basically, the tanks are 16 feet underground. Mm-hmm. And so you have ground level here, and then you have where the tank opening is, which is about 4 to 6 feet down. Okay. And then the tank from there is about 10 feet down. So I was at the second level at the opening of the tank. And this bucket it was a 5-gallon bucket that was nearly full. That's how I know it was 4.5 gallons. And it had spilled over because we had crews, a bunch of different crews running around. And it's tumped over onto my back. And once anybody who's, you know, I mean, I'm sure that you've touched fingernail polish and you know that feeling, you know, and if
Yes,
you touch
yes.
pure acetone, you really know because, you know, it's cold, it evaporates quickly, you know, it's a very, once you touched it once, you can't mistake it for, you know, something else. So I knew immediately without even seeing that that's what it was. And it was very odd. And I explained this, you know, in my book and also on my Facebook page more in detail, where, you know, you've seen in movies where near death experiences, everything kind of stops, like time stops. Well,
Right.
for me, it like went in slow motion, and it's so bizarre, and I feel like I sound crazy saying it, but I don't know if you've ever seen water droplets like kind of like weave and do
Oh,
all.
yes. Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Yes, I was, not only was I looking at that, looking down into the tank, and I knew I was drenched in this stuff, and you know, I'm watching this, you know, and I'm literally hearing conversations in my head, you know, about how explosive this stuff is, how dangerous it is, how you should never, you know, honestly, even getting it on your skin too much will start to like, you know, give you like rashes and like, you know, start to like burn your skin. So
Right, because it's very corrosive, isn't it? Like, there's a
yes,
reason they don't put it in a lot in most nail polish anymore. For good
exactly. Yeah, it's
reason.
very, very corrosive. I mean, I mean, we used to actually play a prank on people where we would pretend to get like the fiberglass catalyst in our eye or something, you know, or near our eye, and we'd be going, oh no, oh no. And we'd hand the new guy some styrofoam cups, and we're like, we need 2 cups of acetone, go get it for us. You know, and he'd run over there and he'd scoop it and he'd come back and he'd have just a little piece of styrofoam in his hand, you know, and we'd all laugh at him because he didn't know that if you, I mean, the second styrofoam touches that stuff, it disintegrates immediately.
Right.
So yeah, it is very corrosive. So I had about, you know, a little over 4 gallons of this on my back, and like I said, you know, in slow motion, everything is just like, you know, I'm hearing all of these, you know, from my training, you know, like how explosive this is, how bad it can go, and the next thing I hear is it sounded just like somebody threw down a glass bottle and it shattered. And I heard something shatter, and then just the loudest noise that you could possibly imagine. The way I describe it on my Facebook page is, imagine you're driving with Jeff Gordon and he's doing 250 miles an hour, and then you stick your head out the window.
Oh,
Like
wow. Yeah.
that, yeah, it's like that intense, you know, the intensity of it was just that, honestly, that was probably the most notable part of it, was the intensity of like, you know, like how loud it really was, because it didn't hurt, you know, obviously I was in shock, you know, and had adrenaline and all that, so it didn't really hurt physically. It felt strange, but you know, it was just how loud it was. I mean, I was screaming at the top of my lungs and couldn't even hear myself.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, so to
And
fast
real
forward.
quick,
Oh,
John, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt you. Tell everybody
no.
the name of your book, real quick, before I forget.
Well, I'm still working on it right now, and
Oh, okay, cool. Very
yes,
cool.
yes. I would say the names are kind of in limbo, but I do have pieces of the book on my Facebook page, if you don't mind me sharing it.
No, go ahead. Share everything.
If you just go to Facebook and type in "What's Your Problem?"
Ah, okay.
Yes, it's actually, I believe, "What's Your Problem?" a testimonial. And basically what that was I started a support group about 8 months, 10 months into my sobriety. And because I started rock climbing after that, getting ahead of myself here, but essentially that, you know, I was using that as a platform to kind of get the story out and to let people know they're not alone, you know, because people every single day, I mean, tons of people, you know, get on, you know, these opiates, you know, and they say, oh, well, a doctor gave them to me, so I'm fine. I'm not addicted
Right.
to them, you
Right.
know, and that's how I was for years, you know, almost a decade. And it's the furthest thing from the truth.
Right. So okay. So I'm assuming the acetone exploded is what happened.
Yes, ma'am. There was a faulty light bulb. That was the glass that I had heard.
Ah,
And the
that's just like the
faulty,
perfect storm of all things bad that can happen.
yes, yes, exactly.
Wow.
But you know, what shocked me beyond that was that we had probably a few thousand gallons of explosive material, all in like a parking lot, of different chemicals and things like that were in barrels. And I'm really surprised that none of those exploded as well, because I ran by a 55-gallon drum of acetone that had the cap off of it.
Right, and at this point,
and I'm completely engulfed in flames. Yeah. And I actually found out that acetone, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think acetone burns like 2 times hotter than gasoline, something like that. It burns like a blue color. It's really intense. So, ambulance, they arrive, which they are amazing. The Hollandale Beach Fire Department and the police officers, everybody there in the Hollandale Beach, Florida area, we made the call at about 1:23 p.m. and the first responder there was there by 1:25.
Wow. Now, did your
the first
coworkers
ambulance
put you out?
No, I remember absolutely everything.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I actually reignited about 4 or 5 times.
Holy mackerel.
At the time, my dad was actually one of the crew members that was on that I was working with him that day. And there was another coworker, a good friend of mine, down in the tank as well, and they were stuck because there's only one way out of those tanks, and that's through the manhole. And the manhole was engulfed in flames. And even if it wasn't, it's about an 11-foot jump, to try to pull yourself out. So you need a ladder.
Right.
So when I got out, I made my run around and went to the one fire extinguisher that I later on found out. We had over 50 of them. And I just so happened to grab the one of 4 that worked. Out of like 54. So there was only 4 of them that actually worked, and I grabbed the 1 out of 4 that did. But I was, I still had, critical thinking skills. It was so bizarre, because I had a respirator mask on, it's kind of like a mixture of like a painter's mask and what a firefighter would wear, like the shield over your face, which is what saved my face. You could probably see this scar here, which is where the face mask had melted onto my my nose, but you could see like a perfect line kind of around my chin area here, and that's where that mask was resting. So anyway, so all that happened, and we get the ladder into the because there was one guy on top. So I ran to the fire extinguisher, but I'm thinking, I'm engulfed in flames, this thing might blow up. So I stop and I look at the other guy up top, and I'm pointing to the fire extinguisher. So he knows right away. He runs over there, pulls the pin, puts me out. And I'm kind of out of it, but then it dawns on me when I look over and I don't see anybody else that there's 2 guys still in the tank, and one of them is my dad.
Right.
So we get the ladder in there, and another part of this is because the tanks are circular, you have to add the ladder you had to hold it, or it would slide into the tank.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I had to physically hold it. So I told him to spray directly down into the tank where the flame was coming from, so they could come out. And I was holding on to this aluminum ladder that was literally melting as I was holding it. And my dad was the first to come out, and then the other guy who came out, because they had no oxygen down there, so as he was coming out, he actually passed out, with like one arm hanging out of the manhole.
Oh, wow.
My dad, had to grab him out of there. So, but every now and again, my buddy would, he would take the fire extinguisher and spray it on me, and then the fire in the gas tank would get bigger. And I was like, stop, don't point it at me, point it here, But I later on found out, he said, John, every time I took that away from you, you would reignite because you were still soaked in the acetone.
Wow. So, I mean, John, let's think about this for a minute, and the strength of the human spirit. You're literally
I
a
don't know about
dude
that,
on
but
fire,
yeah.
saving two other guys from dying in a fire. Like,
Right. Yeah.
that's
I
amazing.
was definitely in shock
Unreal.
because anything that John's ever done, I've ran away. So I was definitely in shock that day.
Yeah, that is some
Um,
adrenaline. That's just like,
yeah.
the mother that lifts the car off the kid story.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing, and like I said, that the ambulance got there very quickly after everybody had gotten out, and we ran to the highway, and we were just kind of waiting, and the second guy to come out, he actually just started walking down the road. We had no idea where he was going, so all the attention went on to him.
So he was out of it.
Right, like he
From
was
the
in
lack of
such shock.
oxygen. Yeah, yeah, and shock.
Apparently, it's a pretty common thing where people will just start like wandering away,
Mhm.
and so all the attention was on him. So I just sat on the bumper of the ambulance, and I'm looking up at this just, I mean, it looks like, like 1,000 tires were burning or something like that. It was just thick black smoke that was just literally so thick that it was covering the background skyline deal of Miami, because we could see the buildings in the background, but all that smoke completely covered it. So all I could think about was, oh my gosh, I am so in trouble. I am so in trouble. We're gonna have so much work to do tomorrow. And I'm like, this is what's going through my head.
Right? I'm
And
not laughing because it's funny. It's just like
oh, no, no,
yeah,
no, no,
definitely
I
a shock.
that's how I actually got through everything. There was one point in time while we were waiting for the ambulance where I said, okay, I'm going to die. Like, I knew that for sure, because I felt the peace come over me. I felt like I had kind of tunnel vision. I felt very tired, and it's very strange. It was like a light switch. It was like, okay, I'm dying now. But it
Right.
was it was right after, like, everything had kind of calmed down, and I remember laying in the grass. It was very hot that day, and the grass was kind of cool on my skin, and I was just, I called over to my dad, and he ran to me, and he put my head on his knee, and I said, "Hey," I said, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go ahead and go." You know, and he said, "No, you're not. You're gonna be just fine." And I said, "Dad, it's okay." You know, and then I started to hear him pray, and
Mm,
I was like, "Oh no, like, this is worse than I thought." Because when my dad starts praying, it's a big deal.
right. It's
Because
like that one
actually,
person in your family that never cries. So when they
yes,
start crying, everybody starts crying. They don't even know why.
exactly. Yes, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal, because that person, yeah, you're exactly right. Yes. Because actually, like, I want to say 10 and a half years prior to that accident, my dad was shot in the point blank, shot in the head with a 22 hollow point from an accidental discharge. And it went in through here, and it bounced off his temple, but didn't exit, went back in behind his right eye, and then exploded. And he stayed about, I think, 3 days in the ICU, and then checked himself out. And that was his pain pill addiction, was through that.
Okay, addiction
Have,
aside, you people have to be the most favored family on the planet.
it's so funny you say that. The very first phone
You can set
call,
them on fire.
the very first phone call that I received when I got home was from a very good friend of mine. Her name is Jean, and her sons were one of my best friends since I was 4 years old. And I just hear, "Hey, John, someone wants to talk to you," and they handed me a phone, and all I hear over the phone is, I mean, it was curse words and all kinds of stuff, but she's screaming in the phone. She said, "Hey, I don't know what the heck is going on down there, but you Veris boys, you better knock this stuff off." And I'm like, "What are you talking about, Miss Jean?" And she said, "Well," she said, "10 years ago, your dad shoots himself in the head, and he gets out of the hospital and he's fine, and now all of a sudden you burn 3/4 of your body and you're fine. She's like, but it's time to stop. You know,
Right.
she's like, enough with the near-death experiences. We've had enough. I think she said, we get the point or something like that.
I know. For those of you that know, it totally reminds me of not John the Baptist, but John. John. Like, boil him. Nope, it's not gonna work.
Yep, exactly. But yeah,
so you're in the hospital and they've
yes.
given you just, I mean, better living through science, you know, and like we said, they had to. It wasn't like they were being irresponsible.
Right.
You know, but now tell us how coming out of the hospital that kind of came with you.
Sure. And just briefly, believe it or not, when the ambulance first got there and they freaked out, they threw me on the gurney. They said, you need to get in here. And, you know, I got on there. I said, hey, man, calm down. And then all of a sudden I feel something along my leg, and because my shirt was burned off of me. And I was like, what was that? And then all of a sudden I look down and I'm naked. And I'm like, hey, I said, I just bought those Levi's like 2 weeks ago, man. I could have taken them off. And he's like, no, you don't need to move and blah, blah, blah. He said, we need, you know, such and such cc's of morphine, stat, and this and that. You know, he's like, we're going to get, you know, they're trying to put an IV in me and give me morphine. And I said, no morphine. I'd never taken drugs.
Right.
And, you know, because I was always afraid because my dad was addicted.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, oh, he's like, all right, are you allergic to this? I said, no. He went, then I'm confused. And I said, I just don't want anything. I'm fine. He said, what's your pain level? I said, it's like a 1. I'm okay. And yeah, so he's like, listen, you're in shock. It's going to wear off. You're going to need this morphine. I said, you better not give it to me. And I guess he had called up and asked what my birthday was, and they found out that I just turned 18 the past March. So I did have a say in, you know, in, you know, if they could give me medicine or not. So, so this went on for, to my knowledge, I mean, I've heard 3 days, but I mean, I know for sure that it was at least 1 or 2, and I just refused pain medication. And, you know, you know, it's funny that because, you know, I basically, well, so anyway, I'll get off that topic and fast forward to say that once I got to the hospital, they, you know, they said, hey, you know, you're burned too badly to be here, so we need to send you an hour and a half south of here. And the paramedic said, hey, man, he said, I've got some really good news and some terrible news. And I said, okay, give me the terrible news. He said, the terrible news is that we have to go all the way about an hour and a half south of Miami, southern Miami. And I said, great. I said, well, what's the good news? He said, the good news is I drive really fast. I said, awesome. So it took us about, you know, 45 minutes to get there. And once I got there, you know, they immediately wanted to put drugs in me. I said no. And they even sent in good-looking nurses, you know, to kind of flirt with me. And I was just like, I really sat there. I was like, is she hitting on me right now? Because she's just like, you know, oh, you're just so cute and this and that. And then all of a sudden the topic came up, you know, so how come you're not taking your medicine? I was like, get out, you know. So I knew right away. I said, no. I said, get out. I don't want to talk to you. So the day before my surgery, they had told me that that they were going to give me something just a little bit stronger than a Tylenol. They said, because if you don't have this, your heart's going to stop, you know, during the surgery. You won't be able to take this pain.
Right.
And
okay, that's a good argument. Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. I was like, okay. I said, so like, you know, like, what are we talking here? He's like, I promise you, it's just, he's like, it's not even as strong as like our lowest, you know, pain pill. He's like, it's just a little bit stronger than a Tylenol. And I was like, okay, you can give me that. And they brought in, I don't remember how much, I believe it was 10 milligrams of morphine. And they put it in my IV and my heart stopped.
Oh God.
Yes. And the next, I mean, I had some things that happened, which are on the Facebook page. It's titled The White Room. There's a part 1 and 2 of what had happened. And anyway, I had come to in this big Haitian woman. I mean, she was about 280 or so, and she is, I mean, she is shaking, like grabbing my gown, and she's shaking me, and she's taking her knuckles and like rubbing on my chest really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, I said, can you quit that? And she goes, you're awake, doctor, And I'm like, yeah, I'm awake now, And, I said, I'm going to go to sleep. So I started to drift off to sleep, and she actually smacked me in the face like a few times. And she's like, no, you're not. No, you're not, smacking me in the face. She said, if you go to sleep, you're going to die.
Wow.
And,
no wonder they called her in.
Yeah.
She's
and
good.
I said, okay, well, what do we do? And the doctor had walked in. He went, listen, man, he said, I didn't know you were telling the truth when you said you've never taken drugs in your life. And I was like, I told you, I don't even take Tylenol for a headache. I said, I don't take these drugs. And he said, well, you weren't kidding. He said, you have a very low tolerance. And yeah, apparently that's what got me through, a lot of the stuff, is because I didn't need a whole lot of the medication that they were given. But unfortunately, they gave it to me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It right off the bat, it started with Dilaudid, which is
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what it is, but they also had fentanyl patches that which is like I think it's like a synthesized opiate, right? Or synthetic is what they call it. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's like 100 times stronger than heroin or something like that.
Right now, fentanyl is one of the, if not the deadliest street drugs at the moment.
Yes. Yeah. I actually know a lot about it, unfortunately. So yeah, this is Max.
Hey, Max.
So basically, I got through all of that, and at that point in time, I was addicted physically, but didn't know it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had to take they were giving me 4 milligram Dilaudid pills, and I was to take 4 of them at a time if I was taking a shower, which was every other day, and then I was to take 3 of them 3 times a day. So, I had to go to 5 different pharmacies in 5 different cities to get all this medication filled, and then I had to have lawyers to say, hey, he needs this. And then they also gave me the fentanyl patches and OxyContin for like in between stuff. Yeah. Not to mention, like Xanax and Valium and just a plethora. I was on like 14 different medications, and
nearly all of them narcotics, if not all.
Yes, pretty close to all of them.
Wow.
I think the only one that was not a narcotic was the one that that was keeping my blood from clotting because I wasn't very active. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I got sick of it once I got home, because I was sleeping for 18, 20 hours sometimes at a time. And then I'd wake up and I'd still be, tired. And the only reason I would wake up is to either shower, change my dressings because I still had burns on my chest and on my back, but they allowed me to go home. So, or to go to therapy. So that was about the only time that I ever was awake. So I would go to Miami. I lived about an hour south of Orlando at the time, and it was about a 3-hour drive to Miami, and I would make that trip about once a month once I was discharged, and to get my prescriptions refilled. And I basically the day that I came in there to tell them I don't want to take these pills anymore was the day that they were trying to schedule me to get a morphine pump. Like, I don't know how they do it, but he said something about a permanent morphine pump in my back or something.
Oh, wow. I've never heard of that. I don't know.
Yeah, from what I understand, it goes into your spine, but it's like a physical like deal. I think it's under your skin. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But it's like a box, and like I guess they just every 3 months or something like that, or 6 months, they replace the medication. It's like a permanent IV drip of morphine. And I was like, no, I said, I'm getting better. I'm getting off this stuff. I mean, at first it was, hey, dad, make they told my dad make funeral arrangements. He's not going to live through the night, to, wow, this is the best recovery that we've seen in the last 12 years.
Wow, that's
So,
amazing.
yeah, and I said, I don't think that, God has brought me this far to, leave me with this, with all these pills and stuff that I'm taking. So, they had a big issue with it. And he said, I'm not taking you off of your pills. I'm not doing anything like that. And I said, okay, well, what happens if I stop taking these things? And he laughed at me. And I'm a very stubborn person. So when he laughed at me, I took it as a challenge to like, okay, well, now whatever you say, I'm going to do the opposite.
Right.
So he laughed at me and said, you're never going to be off these pills. And he said, and if you go off of them yourself, you're going to be crawling into this hospital on your hands and knees, begging me to give you something. And I was like,
the optimism, Doc.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, basically he was just saying, hey, you need to understand, and I'm 19 at the time, I turned 19 while I was in the hospital. And, I'm 19 and I'm like, I can't imagine being just a slave to all these pills, the rest of my life. So I said, well, what happens? Like, is it going to kill me if I don't take it? And he goes, you're going to want to die. And I was like, but will it kill me? He's like, no, it's not going to kill you. I said, that's all I need to know. And he wrote the prescription anyway, and he gave it to my dad. And I said, from this day forward, I'll never take another one of those pills. And I held up my end of the bargain. Aside, there was one exception for a favor to my dad. That night when we got home, I took 2 of them because I had to do my shower and my debridements and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I made an exception, but aside from those 2, I never took Dilaudid again. And when my next appointment came around, he come in, holding his clipboard and writing down. He's like, so how did, getting off those pain pills, how did that go? And I threw him the bottle, and he's just like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm fine.
Those withdrawals can be rough. I have gone through opiate withdrawal.
Yeah, I said, I'm fine. I said, I hallucinated, for a day or 2. I said, I mean, it took 2 weeks to, come back to normal. I said, but I did have some help because I didn't know, because I quit all my medicines, like all of them. And I didn't know that 2 of those, which were the benzodiazepines, they can kill you if you stop.
Yes, when I say we, I'm a recovery coach. And so if somebody comes to us and they are currently on any kind of benzo, we immediately recommend detox. And alcohol, surprisingly, is the other.
Yes, that's another one. Yes. Yeah, so, but I, like I said, I didn't know anything like that. And so, I just kind of laid there and suffered for about 3 or 4 days in bed, and didn't eat anything, barely drank anything, and couldn't sleep. And by the 4th day I was hallucinating things, and like it was just it was terrible. So like basically I got to the point where because like not only that, but I still had open wounds and everything, so I was still in real pain.
Right.
But I was just so stubborn that I wouldn't, I refused to anyway. So they rushed me to the doctor because something had happened. And I don't think I had a full-on seizure, but I definitely blacked out. And, my dad and my stepmother got me to the hospital, and they shot me up with stuff. And I was so mad whenever I came I was so mad.
All that pain and sickness.
Yes. I was like, you guys just literally destroyed everything that I've been working for here, And they're like, no, you don't understand. They were giving you hydromorphine or hydromorphone. We gave you hydrocodone. And I was like, what's the difference? They said, oh, it makes a world of difference because it's almost like, comparing a wine cooler to moonshine, like they said, it's that big of a difference. And I'm like, so this stuff is like really mild then, huh? He's like, oh yeah. and they were like 10 milligram uh, Vicodin.
Mhm.
And he told me to take one every 4 hours. So I had like 200 and some odd pills per month that I was getting. And I thought, because these didn't make me feel tired and stuff like the other stuff did, that they were okay.
Right.
And, then I would go to this doctor in Florida. Now, this is in the prime time. They even made a documentary about it called the Oxycontin Expressway,
Mhm.
where everybody was going down to Florida, where actually in the same city, so in Fort Lauderdale, and then, and in Orlando, and then they were coming back up and selling the drugs up here. So I was actually getting my medication from some of those doctors, unknowingly, and it, I just, I didn't know, because the doctor said it was okay.
Right.
I had no idea, because I was just taking these things like M&Ms. I'm like, oh, these are mild. I was on much worse stuff.
Right. And it's not like you have a lot of street knowledge about
I
drugs.
had none,
In the
zero,
first place.
zero.
Right.
Yeah,
So you're just going to go with what this physician says,
exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he even said it was less addictive, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. So, oh, and actually, the doctor who prescribed me the Dilaudid, the guy that I got stubborn with, he told me, because he said, why are you wanting to get off these drugs? I said, because I don't want to be addicted to them. He said, listen, John, he said, the difference between somebody who takes painkillers and an addict is basically people, if they don't need them and take them, then you're a drug addict. But if you need them and take them, you're not. I was like, so I'm not addicted to them because I need them? And he went, right. I was like, okay, so like I kind of ran with that for a while, saying, well, the doctor said that I can't get addicted to them because I need them. And, use that as an excuse for the next several years, but on the mild stuff that's less addictive,
Right. Right.
And, yeah, and I quickly found out that I was running out way too soon. And, I was going through, couple hundred a week, at first. And, and so then what I would do is I would go to a certain doctor that had a pharmacy in the office, and I would tell him the medications I was on, and he would prescribe. He's like, oh, I can just take over with those prescriptions. He would fill them from his office, but I was still getting them from the hospital.
Right. Because this was right before they set up the system.
Yes.
Now everybody
So
knows.
so now I'm getting like, almost 700 of these pills, and then my lawyers had sent me to a pain management specialist who looked at it and he said, you're taking too many of these. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, what should I take? He said, we're going to give you like, 120 of the same milligram instead of this 200 or whatever. So I said, okay, because I knew in the back of my head, I'm still getting them from 3 different doctors,
Right.
so that's just 120 added added to the pile. But somehow it's still running out early, and that's when I started to realize, maybe it's a problem, but I have this mentality of like, well, I've been through a lot, I almost died, and all these doctors are just giving this stuff to me, so I guess it's okay. And it wasn't until, I decided to, when I met my wife, she lives up here in Illinois, and it wasn't until then that I realized that I had a problem. She actually was the one who picked up on it, because she would notice that the last week or so of my of the month or whatever, I was just really inactive, laying in bed, not doing anything, and hard to be around. So yeah, she raised the question, after I was already 3 or 4 years addicted, and I got very upset with her. And
Of course, that's what we do.
yeah, yeah. Well, a buddy of mine told me, who was actually, he was a user as well. I would buy some from him, and he said, "Hey, one person tells you you have a tail, they're crazy. Two people tell you you have a tail, well, they're just teaming up on you. But if three people tell you that you have a tail, you might want to turn around and look." So I was like, all right, so she's just ganging up on me. Okay. So, so yeah, I kind of ignored that, and then it went away. And eventually we got married, and, I did receive, like a work comp settlement and another settlement, because of the accident. So I had a lot of money, and I ended up buying a home and a brand new car for my wife. And then once I had the money, the drug problem got a lot worse. And when my wife brought it up again, I was like, oh, it's not that bad. You know,
Right. Well, now
um,
your addiction's being financed.
yeah. What was that?
Now your addiction's being financed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because I mean, I always worked, but now, I mean, I'll just go ahead and say it. I guess if I don't say the companies, it's fine. I was once a millionaire. Almost a multi-millionaire. I had like about $1.3 million. So,
Wow.
um, and I took that and lost it all. You know,
Mhm.
I spent every dollar, every penny, and then I took everything that I'd bought, firearms and guitars and bows and basically anything worth value, TVs and all that stuff. Sold everything, just to keep that high going. And eventually it got to the point where I just didn't want to be sick anymore. I was taking so little, or I was just like, but I was still had that mentality where I needed these.
Right. Right. At the end, we're
So
just using to avoid being sick,
yeah,
to avoid withdrawal.
yep. And that's exactly what it was. And I'm gonna say in 2015, 2016 was when I first heard of Suboxone. And there was a doctor that a few towns away, and my wife's cousin had taken it. He said it changed his life. He's like, it doesn't get you high, and he's like, it just makes you to where you're not sick. And I was like, wow, that's a miracle,
Hmm.
And I went to this place. The guy, I had money, obviously, and the guy said, okay, that'll be $425. And I'm like, for what? He's like, the doctor visit. And I was like, okay. So gave him my credit card and paid him $425. I walked in. He said, what are you on? And I said, well, I'm 4 days off, but I've been taking a lot of, pain pills, prescription pain pills. And he said, okay, how much do you weigh? And I said, I don't know, 110 at the time. And he said, okay, then I'm going to prescribe you 16 milligrams. He said, which comes in 2 strips that you put underneath your tongue. And I said, okay. And he said, then you'll be fine. He said, just make sure you take them once every 24 hours. Okay. And my rule of thumb has been ever since the whole doctor incident is that whatever the doctors tell you to take half, you know. So that's what I did. Instead of taking two of the 8 milligram strips, I only took one. And I'm at this point I'm like 4 or 5 days in to my withdrawal, and I'm sick as a dog, and I put that thing under my tongue, and it was just like, boom. I mean, not only was I not sick, but I was as high as I'd been in a long time, and I was like, this stuff does get you high, you
Oh,
know.
absolutely. Hmm.
And I told him that, and he said, well, maybe you took too much or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. I said, but it feels great right now. So, but he explicitly, I'm back on my Xanax now, but he explicitly told me, do not take Xanax. If you mix the two, you'll die. No questions asked. And I was like, okay. And I said, I'm on 6 milligrams a day. And he said, it doesn't matter. He said, stop taking them or you'll die. Okay. So the next day I'm waking up and I'm just out of it. You know, I'm feeling horrible. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll just cut the thing in half because I think I took too much yesterday. And then I took the half and didn't feel any better. And I was like, well, maybe I didn't take enough, and that's why I feel like this or something. You know, because I thought it was like this miracle drug that cured everything, you know. So I
Right.
took the other half, and when they both kicked in, I went, oh, it's too much. And like the next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. They thought I was having a heart attack. They had like these wires and stuff hooked up all over me, and
Right.
my wife's pregnant at the time, and we have a newborn, or he's about 8 to 10 months old.
Hmm.
So, you know, I wake up from the hospital bed and she's got the stroller and she's like 7, 8 months pregnant. And I'm like, what happened? You know, and she goes, well, you told me to drive you to the hospital. And when we got here, you like collapsed onto me. And thank God there was a male nurse to help you up, you know, because I couldn't hold you. And, you know, you were in really bad shape. And she said they had to tie you down to the bed. Like, wow. You know, so that was, you
Well,
know,
that was a complete blackout as well.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and which should have been, you know, a rock bottom or a wake up call, considering, you know, I'd sold everything, I got new kids, you know, and I don't have any money saved, but it wasn't, you know. Um, yeah, I literally broke out of the hospital um, within 8 hours, I think, after coming to, and just escaped from the hospital because somebody actually met me in the parking lot who had pills that I could buy from them. And yeah, so that went on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean that is just a perfect example of the insanity of addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
You know,
not
like I said in the
making decisions.
beginning, you know, it turns into, you know, this like survival instinct where you feel that you need it just like food or water,
Hmm.
or you're gonna die or something, you know. Um, but yeah, but it's amazing, you know, because actually I believe yesterday or the day before I just passed my milestone of 750 days. So
Very good.
without a single opiate.
That's awesome.
I don't want to say that I'm completely like sober. You know, I never claim that because you know, I do have some PTSD issues and things like
Mhm.
that. And my psychiatrist, you know, she prescribes me medications and 2 medications, and I take those, but I don't abuse them. Like
Right.
I've not been out of my head or out of control or high or or had a single opiate since February 19th of 2019.
That's fantastic.
And I'm, like I said, John, you know, John always runs away. John doesn't do these kinds of things. You know, I don't even do these kinds of things, as a matter of fact, you know. So it's only by the grace of God that, you know, I did survive that day. I did, you know, manage to get off of these pills.
Now,
And
how did you eventually end up getting off the pills? Getting off
well,
everything.
I had to escape the mindset that somehow I could find a happy medium. So
Hmm.
I was finding jobs, like better jobs that would pay me more. And it almost got to the point where I was like, you know, if we just do heroin, like if we just get heroin, it's so much stronger, it's so much cheaper, you know, and we can just do a little bit, you know. And but it actually like kind of accidentally happened that way because the just like you said, like the fentanyl stuff. Did we go over our time?
No, no, not at all. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was looking. I thought the something had died. Anyway, keep going.
Oh, okay, okay.
It did
But
not.
yeah, you know, the I don't know what year like the fentanyl thing started happening, you know, but I mean I kind of seen it like, you know, manifest
Right.
back then. Because, you know, we had moved to a bigger town in order for me to get away from any of my, you know, old contacts.
Hmm.
And you know, unfortunately, no matter where you could go to Finland, it doesn't matter, you
Right.
know,
Go
you're gonna,
yeah.
it's, you know, it's not, you know, the drug isn't the problem, it's just a side effect of the problem, you know.
Right.
So so yeah, I just, you know, I needed to fix, you know, it was me. Once I found out that it was me, you know, because I would always blame it on the, you know, blame it on pills and stuff. And I was like, you know, if it wasn't for the drugs, you know, I would have all this money, I would still have my home, you know, because I mean, I literally, I remember when I went to my first meeting, I was living in a garage that was detached from my mother's house, that did not have electricity, it didn't have heat, didn't have air conditioning. The kids lived inside. They had a room, but I had to live outside, you know, because we had to sell our home. And um it was just, you know, that was rock bottom for me. So then my solution is, well, let's just find a way, figure out a way how we can, you know, basically money manage my addiction. You
Right.
know, funny
Right.
as that is.
You need to budget it in.
Yes. I mean, I literally was doing that, you know, trying to figure out a budget. I'm like, you know, maybe if I quit this or if we knock this down, you know, and like I can anyway. Um I like I said, I didn't know anybody here at the time. And this is back in 20 I'm gonna say the summer, this yeah, it was the summer. Probably about August of 2018.
Hmm.
And um I'm working at a junkyard, believe it or not. And it was an interesting job, but it wasn't very fun. You know, I mainly ran these big machines that just crushed cans all day. It was just horrible. But um, um, so I got a hold of, and I'm so ashamed to embarrass. I've never actually told this full story before, so you have to forgive me for kind of stumbling a little bit. Um,
No, you're good. I'm honored that you chose to do it here.
yeah, I mean, this is like I said, I've told bits and pieces, you know, but I've never told like the full story. So, um, well, you know, basically, I was, you know, I'm working this job, and you know, it pays good money, and I get a hold of somebody. Like I said, I'm ashamed of it, but I met him because my son at the time was in kindergarten, my oldest son, and his friend, his friend's real dad, like, you know, when he came around, I found out, oh, okay, his mom left because she didn't like the fact that he was selling and stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, I got a hold of him, and he said, well, right now, he said, I've only got like 10 Percocets, and I'll take them, you know, and drove over there. And when I got there, I said, how much? You know, he's like, I don't know, $6 a piece. I'm like, okay, you know. And I bought them. Now I never, you know, took anything and drove or anything like that. But I was so sick, you know, that I was just like, man. So I reached in there, I just grabbed two of them and I took those, um, just so I wouldn't be sick for the drive home.
Right.
And when I got home, I had crushed one of them up, and I was, you know, putting it up my nose. I've never said that aloud either. So when you know, I crushed a good line, you know, and when I got about that far into the line, I mean, I immediately got tunnel vision, and like the room started spinning, like it was I kind of had like labored breathing,
Hmm.
and I just looked at my wife, and I was like, "Hey, don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay." And she's like, "What's going on?" Because she said I looked terrible. She said like you couldn't even. She said my eyes were so like my pupils were so tiny that you couldn't
Right.
even see black. You know. Um, so she's like, "What happened? What did you take?" you know, I said, it's just a Percocet, but I just took one too many. Just don't let me fall asleep. You know, so here I am lying again. And she's like, what's going to happen if you fall asleep? And I said, nothing's going to happen. Just make sure I don't. Because I knew right away, because I had taken fentanyl before at the hospital. I
Right.
knew right away what I took. And, you know, and like I said, it was that much, you know, of the whole thing, you know, that caused that. I mean, literally just like a,
People don't realize how powerful.
yeah, I mean, it was so powerful. So now I'm thinking in my head, I took 2 whole pills of this stuff
Yeah.
before I even got here.
And
So
they,
like,
they have been, you know, Percocet, but they were pressed with fentanyl.
right. But and that's what I did. You know, I called the guy right away and I said, hey, what are these? You know, and because I went to reach in and pick them up out of the bag and they crumbled in my hand. You know, and he's like, oh, they're just really old and they're my grandma's and this and that. And I'm like, listen, man, I've been taking pills for like 10 years and I've never run across these.
Right. These are not grandma's pills.
Yeah. And I was like, no. He's like, no. He's like, they must have just got stronger because they're old. I'm like, listen, man. I said, I'm not going to be mad. You know, I said, I just need to know what it is in case something happens. You
Right.
know?
I would like to live. So
Yeah.
if you tell me what's going on.
Yeah, but he stuck to his story and just insisted on it. And he's like, you know, it's nothing. So I did have to take a cold shower, but I made it through that. And then, you know, went back to my normal routine of the Vicodin and Percocets. I always stayed on that. I never deviated from that. Because in my head, if I was only on Vicodin and Percocets, it wasn't that bad.
Right. Right.
So, so yeah, about a month later, because what I did was I just tossed those pills into this container near where I would keep all of my stuff for like to crush up and my straws and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So they were just kind of like in the back corner of a desk that was out there, you know, where I kept all my stuff. And you know, here I am again, and I'm 2 days sick, and now I have to go to work. You know, so I'm like really desperate.
Right.
And something dawns on me. And this is where everything just completely changed. And I looked over at my wife and I said, don't be upset. And she's like, what? Because I told her the whole story of what it was. Those are pressed pills, and it was definitely fentanyl or something very strong in there. And you know, she's like, well, you know, you're never going to do that again. So I told her, I said, I have these pills over here, and you know, they're going to pull me out of this withdrawal, and I'll be able to, you know, go to work without hurting. And she's like, I cannot. I mean, she just blew up. I can't believe, you know, that you even think about that. Like, you know, just get through this, you know. And she's like, I'm right here. She's like, quit your job if you have to, you know. Just get, you know, get clean, stay clean. Yeah. And she always stood by my side. Go ahead.
I said, I'm kind of with her, you know.
Yeah. She always stood by my side, and I don't know how I got so lucky because, you know, it took me, honestly, to this day, you know, I'm still kind of dealing with the fact that, you know, I kind of hate myself, you know, because of all that stuff that I did.
Right.
I mean, I went from having $1.37 million to selling my wedding ring and being homeless. You know? And it's like, you know, you say, you know, that you hit rock bottom, you know, it was like I was at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, and I'm, you know, digging with a shovel going, no, there's got to be, you know, I'm just digging deeper, you know? And I kept digging deeper, and sure enough, I did. I crushed that pill, and I took just that much. I mean, just the tiniest amount. And not only did it completely pull me out of my withdrawal, but it also, I was as high as I'd ever been. Even, I mean, ever, you know, I mean, it was so strong.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, these pills are like $5-6, and it only takes that much of one of these pills to keep me high, like, you know, half the day, you know. So I'm only taking this, like, you know, just little bitty piece, like literally chip off of a pill, maybe twice, 3 times a day. Hey, I found my solution, you know. But I learned very quickly that the more fentanyl you take, obviously, the more tolerance you get.
Yeah,
And
that's the changing chemicals in the brain.
right.
You know,
And like,
it's the reward center. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. And because I guess it was because that reward center was so much, what it had, because like when I ran out of like Vicodin or Percocet, the withdrawal usually didn't set in until the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But literally, I got to the point where I had to take the crusher to work with me, and I was doing little bumps in the bathroom and stuff.
Right.
And yeah, and I mean, it was like, doing that, like, I think it got to like every 30 minutes, to an hour. I think it was as often as I was smoking cigarettes, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even more often. And yeah, that was really, really where I started to hit rock bottom, because I had never been so desperate for $5 in my entire life, like ever, and that was the very first time.
What happened that was finally your rock bottom?
A man with an umbrella. That's going to sound so silly.
I got to hear this.
Yes, I had a little bit extra cash. I borrowed it off of, possibly my grandmother, somebody, maybe my sister even, which I'm still ashamed to this day, of it. And anytime I have extra money, I'm always trying to give it to them. They're like, "Stop it!" Like, your family. Like, we knew what was going on. You apologized. You're fine now. It's good, But I still feel guilty, And so, I had some money, and I went up and I bought cigarettes, I bought gas, and I had some money left over, and it was a good day. But the dope man wasn't answering. So, I'm calling and calling and calling, and it's almost noon now. I've been calling since like 7 o'clock that morning, and I'm like, maybe I should just go by his house. So I pull up to his house, and I see this guy who's like walking down the road carrying an umbrella, and I'm like, this guy looks like bad news, And he, then all of a sudden I see him double back, and then he's coming back, towards the car, and I'm like, oh, maybe he'll rob us or something, We're a really bad part of town. So, he just kept going, and so he walks back the other way, and I'm like, what is this guy doing? And it was just, it was so bizarre, because he was probably like, I know he was in his 60s for sure. Like, he was an old man, but he looked really sketchy,
Right.
So, but he kept walking back and forth. So in my head, I'm like, okay, he's a cop or something, he's waiting for me to go to that door.
Right.
Because thank God, also by the grace of God, I have no idea how, but somehow for 10 years of me using, I never got in trouble. Never got a speeding ticket, never got in trouble at all for this. I don't know how. But I mean, it's a miracle. I mean, I actually a few times, one time I had a flat tire, and I just came back from buying drugs. I bought like $8,000 worth of pills and I had them in my car, and just sitting there talking to the cop while he calls somebody, and they brought me a spare tire and put it on my car for me.
Wow. That's
yeah. I was like, okay. I said, never again, yeah, you know how it is to be an addict and say never again.
Mm-hmm.
So the man in the umbrella, he's walking back and forth, and he's pacing, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm just being paranoid. And I was just so desperate to get one of those pills that I got out, and I went up and I knocked on the door, and he didn't answer. So as I'm leaving, another guy comes up, And he just walks right up and walks in. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I went back to my car to get the money. And when I came back, the guy with the umbrella took off running towards me. And I just kind of stopped. And then he jumps up into the doorway and he's like, kind of standing in the doorway. And I'm behind him. And he's got an umbrella tucked underneath his arm. And like I said, he was really old man, but he seemed like a kind of a sweet old man, like, I
Right.
mean, it was just, white hair and like, it was like, he just looked like a grandpa. And he's like, hey, 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 and he's talking like he's, really tweaked out. And he's like, hey man, he's like, can I just get like a little piece, like half or whatever? He's like, oh, I'll pay you back, I'll pay you back. And anyway, basically he's begging for him to give him even just a little quarter of one of those pills,
Hmm.
and saying, and he's. It turns out because he's like, in this conversation, he's like, "Come on, man." He's like, "I'm your uncle." I was like, "Wow, like this guy is asking to borrow drugs, and be in debt to his nephew, you know." And,
Wow.
and I mean, he was just so frantic and belligerent, and back even back when my wife and I first got married in 2012, there would be nights when I would sit in the bathroom with a handful of pills and, I would just cry, just screaming, God, please take this away from me,
Right. Yeah.
and I didn't want to do it. I really didn't. Never at one point did I, certainly after I got married, did I ever enjoy it. The only time I enjoyed it was when I thought it was okay from the doctors.
Hmm.
Um, so, but once I found out this isn't good for you, you're an addict, I immediately wanted to quit and couldn't. So, um, so I see this man and, like but like I said, back in 2012, I got to the point where I did quit for about 4 months. And, I changed vices obviously, but I was off the pain pills. And but then once I got back on them, I was like, oh, I'll get off of them, like I got this many left, so I'll use them, and then tomorrow, I'll
It's
get
always
back.
tomorrow.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
That's what I'm getting to, is that I was putting this off and I kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And until I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I promised myself that I was going to quit on my birthday, some year, and then it was like June. And I'm like, if I would have kept my promise, not only would I be sober and I wouldn't have, I'd be out of withdrawal, but I would have several months of sobriety,
Hmm.
and that just stuck with me. So when I seen that man carrying the umbrella, that old man who was just frantically just, and without any, I mean, just shamelessly, like no, there wasn't an ounce of shame in that guy. He was just
No,
so
pride is out the
desperate,
window. Yeah.
just to get a little piece of that thing, that he's like harassing his nephew to like give it to him. And I was just, I immediately, because like he got real mad about it and then blew up, and I said, hey buddy, I'll see you later.
Hmm.
And I turned around and I left. He called me 2 hours later and he said, sorry about that. That was my uncle. He said, you can come by whenever you want. And I said, okay. I said, I'll be by here after a while. I hung up the phone, and that night, the DEA came in, and it was probably around the time I would have went there. It was about an hour or two later. The DEA came in, busted him, his girlfriend, and 4 other people that were there for those fentanyl.
Wow.
But I had decided not to go back because I was like, you know what? If I don't stop putting this off, I'm gonna be, I almost started to tear up. I'm gonna be an old man, like I'm gonna be an old man sitting in the doorway of an 18-year-old kid begging, please, please just help me out, help me feel better.
Right.
So I was like, there's got to be something more, you
That's
know.
a powerful image. That is a
Yeah, there's got to be something more, you know. Um, and it took me a while, but I did find out that there was, because I had been going to NA meetings, and they always welcomed me with open arms, but unfortunately I was snorting fentanyl in the parking lot, you know, out of a church, and I would walk in and they were like, "Hey brother, how long you got?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "How long you been sober?" And I went, you know, and he went,
yeah.
"How bad is it?" I said, I said, "I got high in the parking lot." He goes, "That's okay. You're here." I was like, "It's okay?"
The only
And
desire
like,
for membership.
that's when the wheels started turning.
Yeah. What did
Right.
it say? The only requirement for membership is the desire to get clean.
Right. Yes. Yes. He's
Mhm.
like, who are you with? He thought that I was with some kind of drug court program or something like that. And I said, "Oh, I asked at the courthouse if they had any kind of AA meetings in town. They gave me a brochure, and I just showed up, and somebody overheard, and they said, 'Wait, you're here voluntarily?' I was like, 'Yeah.' And I said, 'You guys aren't?' And they said, 'No.' They said, 'We came here in that bus we're here at the rehab place because we all got arrested and we have to go to these.' I was like, wow. So, yeah, I went to a lot of meetings, completely blitzed, you know, and I even started going to church again, completely blitzed, and, would probably nod out and fall asleep through half the service, and probably did the same thing at the NA meetings. But, I just kept moving forward no matter what, because when I was in the hospital, my dad, um, actually got the New Orleans Saints cheerleaders to, because they were in Miami for the Super Bowl. He got them to come to my hospital room, and I actually have the only signed copy of a calendar. It's like a bikini calendar of these cheerleaders from the year they won that Super Bowl, New Orleans Saints. And not only did they all autograph it, but they also wrote a note. And I'm just like, "Hi, what's your name?" She's like, "Oh, I'm so and so." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I said, "So, what do you do for fun or whatever?" She's like, "Well, when I'm not cheerleading, she's like, I work at a hospital." She's like, "I'm a doctor." I'm like, "Okay." And like, then this other lady was like, "Yeah, I'm a nurse." And I'm like, "Really?" Like, I mean, it sounds so like sexist to do that, but I was like, "You guys are New Orleans Saints cheerleaders, and like, but you're also doctors. Like, what are you, an astronaut too? Like, why don't you rub it in some more?"
Right.
Um, but yeah, they were great. And but anyway, they told me, they said, "We would love to, like, get your message out and kind of advertise some, stuff to like help you raise money for your hospital bills or whatever you might need it for." So, we kind of threw that idea away, but we loved the idea of coming up with a t-shirt just so, me and my dad could kind of wear them, or whoever wanted, our friends or whoever wanted some. And he came up with this slogan, that says, "Whatever it takes." And I've always lived by that,
Mhm.
that, whatever it takes, even if I'm going to fall, I'm still going to continue to move forward. Like, there's nothing that's ever going to stop me from moving forward. Even if I, consistently fail all the way to the end, and I never succeed, at least I'll still move forward, you know. And because, I saw that man and I said, "I'm not going to procrastinate. I'm not going to put this off anymore. I'm actually going to do this." And, I'm not going to end up like him, you
Right.
know.
So did you go into rehab? Did you end up doing home
I
rehab?
actually didn't. I punished myself. And for 14 or 15 days, um, I was writhing in pain and agony. I obviously quit my job. Um, and I just, you know, it's funny. It was almost like that scene from Walk the Line, you know, where June Carter is like, you know, wiping the sweat off, you know, Johnny Cash, and he's, you know, withdrawing in the bed, but she's, you know, making sure he doesn't leave. And that's what my wife did for me, you know, and she made sure I stayed in that bedroom. And, you know, it got to the point, and I was like, you know, after 15 days, I was like, I cannot believe that. I said, I feel like 10% better. I said, but I'm still horrible sick, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I actually decided to go to a Suboxone, back to a Suboxone clinic, and like a real one, because that guy actually ended up getting arrested because he was just giving out whatever, you know.
Because medical assisted therapy is a thing, and it works for a lot of people.
Yeah, you know, and I talked to them about it, and when I told them the amount, she said, you were like barely 100 pounds at the time, and he told you to take 16 milligrams. I was like, yeah. And I only took 8, and that almost killed me, you know. I said, so what I'll probably do is just take like a little piece off of these pills, you know, just to kind of help, you know. And she said, well, you don't have to do that. She said, we have 2 milligram pills you can take. And I was like, well, that would be great, you know. So she gives them to me, but like I said in the beginning, my rule of thumb is when someone gives you something, I always take half, you know.
Mhm.
And when I would take those 2 milligrams and then break it in half, that 1 milligram under my tongue didn't get me high, you know, but it was just enough to where I kind of felt hope, you know. I kind of, you know, the wheels kind of started turning in my head, and you know what, maybe there is light on the other side. And I used that for, I used the 1 milligram a day for, I'm going to say, I'll say 3 months. I want to say 2.5, but I think it was about 3 months. And then for the next month, I, like every week, I came down and split it in half. So basically, I went to, you know, 0.5 milligram, and then to 1/4 of a milligram. Then on the third week, I took like, you know, just a little tiny piece of that. And then once I told my doctor about it, she's like, this is ridiculous. She's like, you're off of the job. Like, you beat it. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. The amount that you're showing me that you're taking, she's like, honestly, it's comical that you're still, you know, thinking that you're on this stuff.
Right.
So yeah, that was what saved me, you know, was just a couple months of using that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so now you said you're what, 700 and we have an intruder.
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Clean.
Hi,
Hi.
What's your name?
Laura.
Laura?
Laura with an E in front.
Okay.
Laura.
That is a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you trying
How-
to?
How old are you?
Okay.
Grandma wanted to see if you're still in the interview.
Okay. Well, we are still in the interview, so go tell her we're wrapping it up. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was very nice to meet you.
That's my 8-year-old. So
She
everybody's
is gorgeous. She's so adorable. I wanted a daughter so bad. I still do.
We
But
have an 8. She's our 8-year-old, and then we have 3-year-old triplets. And
oh wow. Wow.
the
Very
first
blessed.
3 girls, and then right at the end, they're like, "It's a boy." My husband's like, "Oh, thank you, Jesus."
Yeah. I was very excited whenever I found out that whenever my wife got pregnant. I found out January 27th of 2012 at about 10:30 in the evening. And we had been trying for probably 7 months. You know,
Mhm.
I had a friend of mine. This is the last story I'll tell. I'm sure that I've took up a lot of your time, but I had a friend of mine, and I'm putting this in the book as well. His name is Manny, and he was a volunteer at the hospital. And the very first time I met him, he walked into my room the day I got out of the ICU. And he says, "Hey," uh, um, he said, "be thankful that you're here right now." So I'm thinking, you know, oh, I am, you know, I'm very thankful to be alive. And he says, no, you know, be thankful that you're here. And I said, okay, I am, you know. And he said, no, you're not understanding me. And I'm like, is this guy crazy, you know? So I'm like, okay, well, explain it to me. he said, you really need to be grateful that that fire happened. And I said, okay. He said, I just wanted to let you know that because you had died in a car accident on the way to Illinois, and then left. And I looked at my dad thinking maybe they talked in the waiting room or something like that. I'm like, who was that? And he's pale as a ghost. And he goes, don't mess with me now. He said, tell me you know who that was. And I said, I have no idea. I've never seen him. And he goes, Don, how did he know where we were going, when we were going, and what we were doing, and how did he know that we were from Illinois? And I was like, think about that. He just said that I would have died in a car accident on the way to Illinois if the fire hadn't, you know? And yeah, and he goes, if you're not lying to me and you really didn't know him, he said, if we'd ever see him again, we just saw an angel. I was like, I would say probably, you know? So it turns out he was an angel, but, you know, not, you know, I mean, he was just a really sweet guy who, you know, really just helped anybody and everybody that he could, you know, and never asked for anything other than a smile in return. And we became very, very, very good friends. And, you know, but I asked him about this later on, and I said, hey, what are you talking about? I said, how did you find out I lived in Illinois? He said, you live in Illinois? And I said, yes, Manny, you told me I was going to die in a car accident. He said, no, not me. I said, Manny, come on. You know, I said, like, why did you say that? He goes, oh, I don't have any recollection of saying that you were going to die. I said, like, now I'm freaking out. I'm like, Manny, you said that I was going to die in a car wreck. Yeah. And I was like, how did you know I was planning a trip to Illinois for Thanksgiving? You know? And he goes, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, okay. So he would do that, though, every now and again. And the very last time I saw him, I came in to visit, and you know, he was excited to see me, and he sat down with me. He said, hey, I wanted to tell you something. He said, I wanted to let you know that you don't have to worry. I was like, I'm not worried. He said, no. He said, you're going to find a woman, and she's going to be your... He said, you're going to find a woman, and she's going to be your angel. And he said, she's not going to notice, you know, she's going to look past your scars, but she's going to have some scars of her own, but on the inside. And you're going to look past those as well. And I was like, okay, man, you know, I'm 19 years old, you know. And he said, no, I really want to tell you that because I had a dream. He said, you were in this house. He said, it had a big oak tree out front. And he said, I saw you on a couch. He said, sorry.
You're good.
He said, I saw you on a couch and there were kids running around the house. Now, when I was in second grade, I had a project of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I didn't have an answer. So she gave me the weekend to think it over. And I thought I came up with a really good one. I put down that I want to be a dad, you know. And excuse me, I'm sorry. So, you know, I always wanted to be a dad, and that was almost taken away from me, not only in the aspect of, you know, dying, obviously, but a lot of people that I knew, you know, when you get burned, you can also, you know, because I actually lost my, you know, appropriate to say, but I lost like my features on my chest, for instance. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people that lost their manhood as well, you know. So like that, you know, even if I lived through that, you know, like that was a very real possibility. And literally so many nurses made fun of me for it. They said, literally, the only thing on you that's not burned is your face and your manhood.
Well,
Well, then I'm doing great. So yeah, it's very bizarre.
well,
Um,
to me, this whole story from your dad, keep an eye on your boys
yeah,
because
yeah,
men
no
and
kidding.
family, one way or another, are destined to have. And when I say great, it's not great
Right?
to pick up the face. It's not great to be set on fire. But what comes out of it,
Right. Yeah.
you're just destined for great things and to do great things and
I
to
sure hope so.
be, a light in the face of tragedy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a really powerful way to end things. I think that's a really great way to end things,
Yeah.
and it kind of wraps it all into a nice package of all this trauma, the addiction, and yeah, I think for your next anniversary, you should actually get your wife an engraved trophy
Yeah.
or a medal.
Yes, because if you don't mind, I just wanted to add a little tag that she was in labor. I mean, God bless her. She was in labor for I think 3 days in the hospital. They were giving her as much medication as they could, trying to induce this labor.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor came in and said, "Hey, we're going to give her more." And my phone rings, and it's my dad. And I answer the phone, and he says, "Hey, man," he said, like, "happy anniversary, I guess." I'm like, "Huh?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know if that's what we're calling it." He said, "But in 2 hours, he's like, it'll be midnight, and that'll be our anniversary, 3 years since our
Wow.
accident." I was like, "No kidding, huh?" And I hung up the phone, and I looked at the doctor, and I said, "Hey," I said, "don't even bother with that medicine." And he's like, "Why is that?" And I said, "Because as much as I want to see my son, he's not going to be here till tomorrow." And he said, "No, no, no." He said, "We're putting this medication. It's going to induce her labor, and she's going to have the baby tonight." And I said, "I'm sorry, buddy." I said, "I answered to." It would just be too. It would be too crazy for it not to happen.
Mhm.
Him to be born one day before.
At this point,
And
yeah.
yeah, I was like, what I say here, much, much stranger things have happened. You know, so I said, unfortunately, I think he's going to be born tomorrow. And at around 1:23 p.m. on the day after Thanksgiving in 2009, is my accident was, and at 10:23 a.m. I'm sorry, yes, a.m. 10:23 a.m. the day after Thanksgiving in 2012 is when my son was born.
Wow. That's awesome. That is really cool. And I'll tell you what, if Angela ever wants to come on and tell her viewpoint of this
Yes.
story,
I would love her to, because I don't know what she dealt with, because the scars that Manny was referring to was that she wasn't supposed to be able to have kids.
mm-hmm.
And he's like, because the doctor said she had all this scar tissue on the inside, and like it wouldn't take.
Right.
So that's why it took us like almost a year to have a child.
But yeah, I
And
think that would be just a really cool,
yes,
to have her
yes,
perspective on
yes,
to tell the same story, but from her side of it.
yes,
That's very
yes. I would love it, because she'd be able to go much more in depth. But yeah, I just wanted to end it by saying that I'm so thankful for the opportunity. It was so very nice to meet you. Sorry that if I rattle on for too long, but I just I want to let everybody know that I promise you, nobody who's ever taken drugs or is on drugs when they were a little kid wrote down in their notebook, "When I grow up, I want to be addicted to these," or "I want to be an addict," or "I want to be an alcoholic," or "I want to be in a bar every day." I promise you, if anybody ever wrote a memoir about their life on drugs or alcohol, it would say, I didn't expect to end up here," because nobody expects to end up there. No one thinks it's going to happen to them, but it's so easy, and it can happen to you, but it does not mean that you can't do something about it, because if God could take somebody who was supposed to die, and 3 years later on that very same day, put life into, or give life into the world through a womb that where life shouldn't have been to begin with, so if he can do all that, and it's just amazing. I mean, explaining all the amazing things that God does and is doing is kind of like swimming to the bottom of the ocean and trying to explain to a fish what a sunset looks like.
Right.
Just it's silly, and I just wanted to let everybody know that, in my life personally, God took something that was dead and he brought life to it. And that's what he does in everything, whether it's physically or metaphor.
Yes. Yes.
Just like Romans 6, he says that we are dead. We are dead in our sin, and it's only by his grace that we are resurrected. So
That's right.
if you are having issues, if you don't mind, can I plug some things?
Oh, absolutely. And
Okay.
your Facebook post again. And
Yes.
control guy just showed up. So perfect timing.
All right. So, if anybody is struggling with anything, I am a licensed, I just got my ordination. I'm a pastor now. And I'm going through the drug counseling courses now. But I do have counseling certification. On my Facebook page, if you search "What's Your Problem?" a testimonial, you'll find my personal cell phone number, and that is available 24 hours a day, Monday through Saturday. Sunday is my only day off, but if Sunday is the day that you need me, call me if it's an emergency. So I have that. I also have an Instagram, and it's "What's Your Problem?" with an underscore at the beginning and an underscore at the end. And I am still working on that book. Right now, I'm about 5 chapters in.
Awesome.
And hopefully we can discuss this later on, maybe a year from now or something, whenever I have the book out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John, for being on here.
Thank you so much, Miss Leslie. It was certainly, it was just amazing for me to even meet you. So
we will definitely keep in touch. You're going.
All righty. Hey, thank you so much. You go take care of your family, and you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. And that's going to do it for us for this scene, or this episode of the recovery scene. I'm going to go deal with the pest control guy. And remember, if you have any comments, if you have any questions for John, go ahead and leave them. I will let you know when the video is going up, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.